Stephen A. Smith and Becky Hammond just went head-to-head over Jalen Brunson, and things got surprisingly tense on live television. The debate started with Brunson's rise to superstardom, but it quickly turned into a heated disagreement that has NBA fans picking sides. Let me break down what happened. Right after a historic ticker tape parade through the streets of New York, it was time for the Knicks to pull out the receipts. There was no better way to do it than a live recording of the Roommates show, where Brunson and Josh Hart got their dream guest, the ESPN veteran, the lifelong Knicks fan, and the team's sternest critic, Stephen A. Smith, for one explicit purpose: to demand a public apology for years of skeptical takes. Smith received boos from the crowd the moment he was introduced. The longtime ESPN analyst asked the audience to be understanding, reminding them he had been through a lot as a lifelong Knicks supporter. It didn't help. The Garden crowd wasn't interested in context. They had waited 53 years for this moment, and they weren't going to let it slip by quietly. Hart and Brunson had a moment to confront the analyst directly during the live show. After Smith appeared, the crowd loudly jeered at him over his previous criticism and doubt of Brunson and Hart. Both Brunson and Hart then confronted him directly and asked whether he could admit he was wrong. Smith didn't hesitate. He acknowledged his fault and apologized to everyone. The exchange went something like this. Hart looked at Smith and asked, "Can you sit here and admit you were wrong?" Smith cupped his ear. "Say what?" Hart leaned in. "You were wrong." And then Brunson cut through all of it with one word: apologize. Smith folded. "I was beyond wrong. I apologize." What Smith actually said in full was this: "I'm a grown-ass man. I was beyond wrong. I apologize to this brother on national television. I apologize to you. I apologize to the entire Knicks organization. Let me be very, very clear. I have never been happier to be wrong in my life." The crowd erupted. 4 years of doubt. 4 years of mockery, 4 years of questions about whether this team, this player, this 6'2" point guard from New Jersey could actually do it. All of it crashed down in that one sentence. But then something happened that nobody expected. 20 minutes into the show, a name that Smith hadn't apologized for came up, and the crowd beat Hart to it. On Friday, the crowd said it before Hart could. 20 minutes into Smith's appearance, Hart brought up the elephant in the room, and the room answered for him, breaking into chants of Becky, Becky. Nobody needed it spelled out. Hart put it plainly: "I will give you credit for coming up here and admitting fault because I'm not naming names. I'm still waiting on somebody to say they were wrong about someone who's led our team to a finals championship for the first time in 53 years. I'm still waiting for something. We'll be waiting for that apology." Karl Anthony Towns drove it home. "He's not going to say it, so I'm glad you did." The whole building knew who they were talking about. And now Smith wasn't just being asked to apologize for himself. He was being pressed to publicly call out one of his own ESPN colleagues. He didn't flinch. Smith doubled down on Hammon directly. "If you're wrong, you're wrong. If you're scared to be wrong, you don't belong in this business. You've got to say what you feel. You've got to say what you feel in the moment that you feel." It was a direct shot, not veiled, not diplomatic. Smith, who had just finished eating his own crow on live television in front of thousands of screaming Knicks fans, was now pointing the camera squarely at Becky Hammond and saying, "Your turn." Hammond, at that point, was talking to reporters in Las Vegas, ahead of a Las Vegas Aces game against the New York Liberty. As a reminder, back in 2023, she had emphatically said on ESPN that Brunson was not a 1A dude because he too small, and later said in 2024 that while Brunson was New York's 1A, he wasn't good enough to lead them to a championship. And when asked whether she'd apologize, Hammond's response was immediate: "But apologize? I'm never gonna apologize for having an opinion. That's what ESPN pays me for." Then, just hours later, she walked up to a microphone and changed everything. But before we get to what Hammond eventually said and how her position shifted in the span of a single afternoon, we need to go back to where this whole story started. Because to understand why that room at Madison Square Garden exploded the way it did, you have to understand what Jalen Brunson was walking into when he signed with the New York Knicks in the summer of 2022. And more importantly, you have to understand how many people told the whole city, that it wasn't going to work. The doubters weren't fringe voices. They were the loudest people in the room. And one of them was standing courtside with a microphone every single night. Brunson had not forgotten who questioned the Knicks' decision to sign him. He had not forgotten the criticism of his contract, the doubts about whether he could lead a contender, or the suggestions that New York had overpaid for a player averaging just 16 3-points per game in Dallas. Less than a week before the apology, Smith had criticized Brunson for playing to be an MVP, rather than playing to win Game 3. That's the thing about Stephen A. He never stopped, even while the Knicks were in the finals, even while Brunson was putting up historic numbers. The criticism didn't stop until the trophy was in the building. And still, through all of it, Brunson never said a word back. Not once. He played, he won, he waited. If there was ever a moment for Brunson to revisit old criticism, it was after delivering the Knicks their first championship in 53 years. Instead, he responded to years of doubt the same way he always had, by refusing to engage with it. "I didn't respond to them then," Brunson said in a press conference after the title win, "and I'm damn sure not going to respond to them now." That's Jalen Brunson. That's always been Jalen Brunson. Quiet, deliberate, unimpressed by noise. The kind of player who made his case entirely on the court and let everyone else deal with it afterward. So when he sat on that roommate's show stage and let Josh Hart do the talking, while he watched Smith squirm, that wasn't out of character. That was exactly who he'd always been. The receipts had been filed. The ring was in the case. And now it was collection time. Back in May 2025, after the Knicks eliminated the Boston Celtics, Brunson had walked up to Stephen A. Smith courtside and delivered a message without actually delivering one. "I'm not going to even say anything," he told the ESPN personality before walking away. That was the seed. That was the moment Brunson planted a flag without saying a single substantial word. Smith described it on First Take later. "Because last year when y'all beat Boston, I'm on the court, and he just walks up to me and looks me in my face and goes, 'I'm not going to even say anything,' and just walked away." And Smith knew exactly what it meant. He knew it then. He'd been carrying it ever since. On the Monday edition of First Take, Smith finally admitted Brunson had remembered correctly. "Let me confess on national television," he said, addressing Brunson directly on the show. He turned the moment personal. "Me and Pops go back over 30 years. National TV. I owe this man an apology. I am grateful for what you have done for this city. What y'all have done for this city. And you won't be hearing any more doubts from me, my brother." Brunson kept it exactly as brief as you'd expect. "We'll see about that. We'll see about that. But thank you." There was no gloating. There never was. But the moment Smith named Hammon, the moment that name was thrown into the arena at MSG, and the whole crowd started chanting, that's when this story became something bigger than just one apology. It became a reckoning for the entire sports media ecosystem that had spent years deciding, with total confidence, that Jalen Brunson was not the answer. At the time of the signing, many had viewed Brunson as Luka Doncic's sidekick rather than a franchise cornerstone. Smith repeatedly questioned why New York had cleared cap space only to land him, asking, "Is he KD? Is he Kawhi Leonard?" Critics also pointed to his size, and Hammon famously argued, "If your best player is small, you're not winning," a belief that followed Brunson throughout much of his career. That line, that one line, it became the rallying cry for every Knicks fan who watched him prove people wrong year after year. And it became the specific debt that nobody had collected on yet, until now. Before Brunson was an NBA champion, before he was the guy making ESPN personalities apologize on live television, before his name was being chanted at the Garden, he was a college kid from South Orange, New Jersey, who most NBA front offices considered a backup at best. With the Larry O'Brien trophy sitting between them on stage, Hart led the charge during the Roommates show, bringing up past criticisms that dated all the way back to their collegiate days at Villanova. "I had some receipts," Hart began. "Fortunately, I was able to win a national championship in 2016. Yeah, go Cats." Hart didn't need to elaborate. Everyone in that building remembered. Brunson, Hart, and Mikal Bridges. Three guys from the same college campus who would go on to win an NBA title together. Spent years being told they weren't big enough, athletic enough, marketable enough to be the cornerstone of anything. They heard it in college. They heard it in the draft. They heard it every single season in New York. Since signing with the Knicks, Brunson blossomed into an all-NBA talent, even finishing 5th in MVP voting, while lifting the Knicks to the 2nd seed in the East. He jumped from 16 3-points per game in his last season in Dallas to 28.7 per game, 4th highest in the NBA. But here's the thing, the jump wasn't a surprise to everyone, because the people closest to Brunson had been telling anyone who would listen that Dallas had fundamentally misjudged him. The whole reason he ended up in New York wasn't just about money, it was about something much more personal than that. What they didn't realize, a Mavericks source later told ESPN's Ramona Shelburne, was that it wasn't just more money the Knicks were offering. It was about family. Rick Brunson, Jalen's father was the first client of agent Leon Rose, who became the president of the Knicks. Rose is Brunson's godfather. So when the Knicks started making moves in the 2022 offseason, when they hired Rick as an assistant coach, when Rose was running the front office, the pull toward New York wasn't just professional. It was personal in a way that Dallas never fully grasped until it was too late. Before Brunson became a star with the Knicks, the Mavericks could have signed him to a 4-year extension. "I really did want to stay in Dallas," Brunson said. "That matters. He wasn't running away. He was pushed out by an organization that repeatedly declined to offer him what his own camp was telling them he'd accept." The Mavericks initially fumbled this by not offering Brunson the extension he could have received before his last season in Dallas started. He was willing to sign it, but Dallas decided he wasn't worth it. He had averaged 12.6 points per game in 2020-21, and there were still questions about his fit alongside Luka Doncic. Then he played much better in 2021-22, averaging 16 points while starting most of the games. Brunson went on to average 21.6 points per game during Dallas's 2022 playoff run, carrying the team through stretches when Luka Doncic was sidelined with a calf injury. He carried the Mavericks to the Western Conference Finals for the first time in over a decade. That performance boosted his market value significantly within the league. By the time Dallas realized what they had, it was already over. NBA insider Mark Stein, appearing on the All-NBA podcast, revealed that Brunson's representatives literally laughed when the Mavericks approached them midway through the season and floated a 4-year, $55.5 million extension. Rick Brunson's version of events was blunt. "That was a 30-second conversation. I wasn't on the phone, but how I got the message was, you guys wouldn't be interested in that deal now, would you? That's how it was said to me. I just laughed." 30 seconds. That's how long it took Dallas to lose an NBA champion. And they weren't just losing a guard. They were losing the guy who would eventually drag a 53-year championship drought to an end in one of the most celebrated cities on the planet. Brunson had loved the city and loved the team, but the Mavericks did not think he was worth the investment. And now they were watching him lead New York to a championship. That decision may go down as the worst front office call of this era. Brunson continued to star in New York, hitting the height of heights as the MVP of the NBA Finals. The Mavs were getting ripped for letting him go, with critics pairing the blunder with the decision in 2025 to trade Luka Doncic to the Lakers. Dallas had acquired both Luka and Jalen on the very same 2018 NBA draft day and had given both of them away. So Brunson arrived in New York in the summer of 2022 carrying the weight of two things: the genuine excitement of going home and the fresh sting of knowing the team that drafted him thought he wasn't worth a proper contract. At the time of the signing, many had viewed him as Luka's sidekick rather than a franchise cornerstone. That framing stuck. No matter what he did on the court, the Dallas shadow followed him. He was the guy who got to be good because Luka pulled all the defensive attention. He was the guy who padded his numbers in the supporting role. He was the guy who had never been the guy. That was the story. That was the accepted wisdom. And at first, the numbers in New York didn't do much to challenge it. He had not forgotten the doubts about whether he could lead a contender, or the suggestions that New York had overpaid for a player averaging just 16 points per game in Dallas. And those questions hit the TV screens almost immediately. Smith was asking them, Wilbon was asking them, Windhorst was asking them. Every pundit with a platform had an opinion, and the opinion was overwhelmingly the same. The Knicks had made a classic Knicks blunder. They'd fallen in love with a player, overpaid for him, and set themselves back. When Brunson signed the 4-year deal with New York, Michael Wilbon said, "He's not a real one. I'm not even sure he's a real two." Brian Windhorst argued Brunson was not going to be the type of player that will elevate them into contender status, while Bill Simmons mocked the move by saying the Knicks were nixing another offseason. Those takes were everywhere. Nobody was an outlier. Nobody was out on a limb. The entire basketball media universe looked at the Knicks signing Jalen Brunson for north of $100 million and collectively shook their heads. And in that universe, Stephen A. Smith and Becky Hammond were two of the most prominent voices saying the same thing, just with slightly different flavors. Smith's version was louder, more theatrical, more personal. He was a Knicks fan. He'd suffered through the lean years. He knew what New York needed, and in his view, Brunson wasn't it. Hammond's version was more analytical, colder, and in some ways more devastating because it wasn't personal at all. She wasn't attacking Brunson's character or his effort. She was making what she believed to be a simple historical argument based on the NBA's track record with small guards. In December 2023, Hammon stated on ESPN's NBA Today that the Knicks lacked a 1A dude. She claimed that because Brunson was a small guard, he wasn't capable of leading a team to an NBA title. Before the NBA Finals, Hammon doubled down on her comments rather than back away. She noted she was speaking on historical NBA data, citing smaller guards like Allen Iverson as an example. She felt stars like Iverson could win individual accolades, but couldn't win championships. That argument had historical weight. She wasn't making it up. Guards under 6'3", outside of Stephen Curry and a handful of rare exceptions, had rarely been the primary driver of an NBA championship team. The history was real. The pattern was real. Not only did Hammon's viewpoints sum up the general consensus at the time, she was also famously a smaller guard who couldn't carry her team all the way. She had come off the bench for the New York Liberty when they lost in the 2002 WNBA Finals, then played a starring role for the San Antonio Silver Stars through 7 playoff appearances between 2007 and 2014 without winning a championship. Rather than just firing off a take, Hammon was speaking from her own experiences when discussing Brunson and the Knicks. That's what made her position different from Smith's. Hammon wasn't being reckless. She wasn't being theatrical. She was drawing on a career's worth of knowledge about what it takes to win at the highest level as a smaller guard. She had lived that specific basketball life, and the data supported her. But the data was about to meet Jalen Brunson, and something was going to give. Between 2022 and 2026, Jalen Brunson did something remarkable. He didn't just get better, he got better at a pace and to a degree that almost nobody in the media world had projected. Every year, the goalposts moved. Every year, he cleared them. Brunson led New York to 4 consecutive playoff appearances, won the 2026 Eastern Conference Finals MVP award, captured the franchise's first championship since 1973, and earned unanimous NBA Finals MVP honors. But the doubts didn't go away. They evolved. When he made the playoffs, critics said he couldn't win a round. When he won rounds, they said he couldn't get past the second. When he got past the second, they said the East was weak. When the East got stronger, they said he couldn't win the finals. The bar kept moving and Brunson kept clearing it, and the people who'd set the bar kept setting it a little higher. The same contract once labeled an overpay became one of the league's biggest bargains. After Brunson accepted a team-friendly extension in 2024 that gave the Knicks added flexibility to build around him. In July 2024, he signed a 4-year, $156.5 million veteran contract extension with New York. Think about what that means. The Knicks came to him during the prime of his career, during the window when he had all the leverage, and he signed a deal that was designed to give the franchise room to add pieces. He could have maximized every dollar. He chose to build something instead. That's not a move a guy makes who's trying to prove he belongs. That's a move a guy makes when he already knows he does. Draymond Green was one of the first major voices to break from the pack. He apologized to Brunson after Game 4 of the NBA Finals, where the Knicks rallied from a 29-point deficit and put the Spurs on the verge of elimination. A 29-point comeback in the finals. The Spurs, with Victor Wembanyama, with De'Aaron Fox, with one of the most talented young rosters in recent memory, had built what looked like an insurmountable lead, and the Knicks dismantled it. And at the center of that dismantling was Brunson making shot after shot, running the offense with a composure that looked almost insulting given the deficit. That was when the doubters started to crack. Not just in public, but in private too. The basketball people who'd spent years saying he can't do this at the highest level were watching him do exactly that, on the biggest stage, against the best competition. The fallout from Victor Wembanyama's controversial shove of Brunson in Game 3 only added to the narrative. The 4-time NBA champion Draymond Green was surprised by the reaction and the non-reaction from Brunson's teammates after the Knicks guard was sent crashing to the floor while battling for position with Wembanyama in the first quarter. The referees failed to call it a foul in the moment, but later acknowledged the mistake. Brunson got up, kept playing. The Knicks lost that game, but the moment revealed something about who Brunson was. He didn't need protection. He didn't need anyone to defend him. He absorbed the hit, picked himself up, and got back to work. That's been his whole story, really. Getting hit, getting up, getting back to work. No noise, no drama, no press conference callouts, just basketball. Brunson had just wrapped up one of the great finals performances in recent memory. He averaged 32 6 points per game across the series, scored 45 in the Game 5 clincher on the road, and walked away with the Finals MVP. He earned NBA Finals MVP honors after guiding the Knicks to the championship over the San Antonio Spurs in 5 games. He scored 45 points in the title-clinching contest, 45 points on the road, to win your city's first championship in over half a century. And he did it against Wembanyama, the generational talent, the 7'4" alien, the player that every analyst had pointed to as the reason the Spurs were a threat. Brunson looked at all of that and dropped 45. Brunson led the playoffs in scoring at 28 4 points per game, while also putting up 3, 2 rebounds, 6 assists, and 1-2 steals per game across 19 postseason games. Those aren't backup numbers. Those aren't sidekick numbers. Those are numbers that belong on the short list of finals performances in the modern era, next to names that nobody ever doubted, and the people who had spent years constructing the argument that Brunson couldn't do this at the highest level were left holding the receipts. Some of them handled it gracefully, most scrambled to reframe their takes, and a few dug in with everything they had. Hammon had another chance to address things during the final series against the Spurs, and her position was clear. If he proves me wrong, he proves me wrong. She wasn't backing down before the trophy was raised. That's fair. You don't change your take mid-series just because the wind is shifting. That's how media credibility works. You say what you believe and you stand by it until the final whistle. Hammon stood by it, but then the final whistle blew, and the Knicks had the trophy, and Brunson had the MVP, and the chants from Madison Square Garden were getting louder. Hart had pushed back throughout the season. In March 2026, he went off. For me, Stephen A., as a part-time Knicks fan, needs to shut the hell up. He barely knows guys that are on the team. Smith had fired back on First Take, essentially telling Hart to sit down and be quiet, instead of defending his teammates so aggressively. That beef between Hart and Smith had been simmering for months. Hart is not subtle. He's the guy on the team who says everything Brunson never says. He carries the emotional weight of the doubts publicly, because his teammate doesn't. So when Smith kept throwing shots at the Knicks even during a championship run, Hart wasn't going to let it slide. Mikal Bridges got his own last laugh too. During a celebratory Instagram live after the title, he sarcastically thanked Hammon, saying her comments only added fuel to Brunson's fire. The Knicks weren't just a team that had won. They were a team that had won, while carrying the specific, named, dated criticisms of specific people. And they remembered all of it with crystalline clarity. After hoisting the Larry O'Brien Trophy following their Game 5 win over the Spurs, Brunson responded to the criticism in his own way, while head coach Mike Brown praised him as a freaking 1A. That line from Brown, a freaking 1A, was aimed directly at Hammond's language. That wasn't a coincidence. That was a coach who'd watched his player get buried in a specific phrase for 2+ years, and he was burying it right back the moment the opportunity arrived. The 1A debate had officially been settled on the court, but the apology question was still open. This had started in December 2023, when Hammon said the Knicks were missing a 1A dude, and that Brunson was too small to lead a championship team. That take followed New York around for over 2 years. She never backed off it. As recently as May, she had said she believed the 2 best teams were in the Western Conference, and stood by her original read as a historical and analytical take, not a personal shot at Brunson. So when Smith stood in front of that MSG crowd and called her out, when he said publicly and forcefully that if you're wrong, you have to say you're wrong, he was doing something that nobody in sports media does willingly. He was turning the gun on a colleague, and the whole internet was watching to see what Hammon would do next. Becky Hammond is not someone who crumbles under pressure. She never has been. A player who spent 16 years in the WNBA, who became the first full-time female assistant coach in NBA history with the San Antonio Spurs, who built the Las Vegas Aces into a dynasty. She didn't get to any of those places by backing down when a room turned against her. So when the Knicks won the championship, when Smith went on ESPN and apologized, when Madison Square Garden was chanting her name as the last holdout, Hammond's first move was exactly what you'd expect from her. She stood her ground. Talking with reporters ahead of the Aces game against the New York Liberty, Hammond stood her ground on her criticism of the Finals MVP. As a reminder, back in 2023, She had emphatically said on ESPN that Brunson was not a 1A dude because he too small, and later said in 2024 that while Brunson was New York's 1A, he wasn't good enough to lead them to a championship. Here's what she said at the Aces shoot-around. Jalen, all he did was prove history wrong. He proves he's an outlier. So you can put his name next to Steph Curry and Isaiah Thomas. I thought he played brilliantly, especially down the stretch. I mean, he was that 1A dude. But apologize, I'm never going to apologize for having an opinion. That's what ESPN pays me for. There's a lot packed into that statement, and it's worth unpacking slowly because it's not nothing. Hammon wasn't dismissing Brunson. She was acknowledging his brilliance and explicitly placing him in the company of two of the most celebrated small guards in league history. She was saying he proved the rule wrong by being an exception. That's actually a more complicated position than pure denial. She wasn't pretending it didn't happen. She was saying it was extraordinary precisely because it was unusual. Hammond then added, leaning into the provocation, "Let me just piss off Knicks fans again and say, I think he's the greatest Knick ever. Give them something else to talk about. I've always been a Jalen Brunson fan." She was trolling and she knew it. That line, "Let me just piss off Knicks fans again," is the kind of thing you say when you fully accepted the chaos and decided to lean into it. She wasn't trying to diffuse the situation. She was throwing a lit match at the curtain, and it worked. The internet immediately exploded. Knicks fans who've been celebrating a championship were now furious all over again. How do you call someone the greatest Knick ever in the same breath as refusing to apologize for saying he was too small to win? Was that a compliment or an escape hatch? It wasn't the first time in recent weeks she defended her original comments. She had also been asked after Brunson was named Eastern Conference Finals MVP, following the Knicks' sweep of the Cleveland Cavaliers. "I think Jalen Brunson's a hell of a player. A hell of a player," Hammond said. "I'm speaking historically on the NBA with what I said. I don't know why everybody's so stuck on that. I said it 2 years ago. I said what I said. I said what I said." That phrase became its own internet moment. In 4 words, Hammond encapsulated the position she'd been holding for 2 years. She made a take based on the evidence available at the time. She believed it was historically defensible, and she didn't think winning a championship retroactively made the take wrong. She was arguing something philosophical, not whether Brunson was great. She clearly believed he was. She was arguing that the analysis was correct, given what was known at the time it was made. That's an interesting argument. It's not entirely without merit. The history of small guards in the NBA really did support her take. In December 2023, there was no Stephen Curry-type outlier precedent for a 6'2" guard leading a championship team at that point. The data was what the data was. She doesn't get credit anymore for basically being correct. When the Knicks lost in the second round of the 2024 playoffs, and then came up short in the 2025 Eastern Conference Finals, that's the detail people conveniently forget in the middle of a championship parade. The Knicks didn't immediately prove her wrong. They had 2 years where the evidence supported her position. Brunson's team hit the ceiling she predicted twice, before finally busting through. As recently as May, Hammond said she believed the 2 best teams were in the Western Conference, and stood by her original read as a historical and analytical take, not a personal shot at Brunson. Right up until Game 5 of the NBA Finals. Right up until Brunson dropped 45 on the road and closed the series out. Right up until the confetti fell in San Antonio. She never wavered. And that consistency, however infuriating it was to Knicks fans, was at least honest. But then something shifted. Hammond went from never going to apologize to, "My opinion was wrong." In the span of a few hours, Brunson just kept winning. That about summed it up. Las Vegas Aces coach Becky Hammond admitted Tuesday night she was wrong about Jalen Brunson after her 2023 comments resurfaced following the title win. I was wrong, Hammond told reporters ahead of the Aces game against the New York Liberty. "My opinion was wrong. Not he proved the exception. Not he's an outlier. Not history was on my side. Just my opinion was wrong." Those 4 words, coming just hours after she dug in at the shoot-around, hit different. This wasn't a slow drift toward acknowledgement. This was a hard turn. Between the morning shoot-around and the pre-game press conference, something happened. Something shifted. And when Becky Hammond walks up to a microphone and says, "I was wrong," that's not a small thing. That's a Hall of Fame player and championship-winning coach saying the words that many in her position spend entire careers avoiding. The admission came after she'd seemingly doubled down on her 2023 comments at the Aces shoot-around earlier that same day. So within the span of a single afternoon, she went from, "I'm never going to apologize for having an opinion," to "My opinion was wrong." What changed? We don't know for certain, but the pressure from Smith's public call-out, live on ESPN, in front of a screaming MSG crowd, had been ringing through the basketball world for days. The Hart call-out on the Roommates show had gone viral. The Becky chants had been replayed on every sports network. The story had built and built until Hammon couldn't walk up to a pregame microphone without being asked about it. And when she finally answered, really answered, she didn't hedge. She didn't use the outlier language anymore. She just said she was wrong. Her full statement was this: "Jalen, all he did was prove history wrong. He proves he's an outlier. So you can put his name next to Steph Curry and Isaiah Thomas. And I thought he played brilliantly, especially down the stretch." Then came the part nobody expected from her earlier in the day, the acknowledgement that it wasn't just history that had been proved wrong. It was her. Her opinion specifically was wrong. No qualifier, no but, just a sentence, standing alone. Knicks forward Mikal Bridges had already admitted that Brunson was motivated by Hammon's criticism. That detail adds a layer, because it means the take that Hammon had defended as analytical, as historical, as nothing personal, was being used as fuel by the guy it was supposedly about. He heard it, he felt it, and he carried it all the way to the trophy podium. Hammon had one more chance to explain her previous comments, when the Knicks became championship contenders. She stood by her opinion from years earlier. "I said what I said," Hammon said. "If he proves me wrong, he proves me wrong." He proved her wrong. She said so herself. And now the last visible holdout from the wave of expert skepticism that had surrounded Jalen Brunson since 2022 had finally publicly stood at a microphone and said the words. But what does it all mean? What does it say about sports media, about the nature of takes, about what happens when the biggest voices in the game get it catastrophically wrong, and then have to sit on that stage while the person they doubted holds a trophy? That's where this story lands next. There's a moment in sports where the receipt gets paid. Not the championship. That's just basketball. The receipt, the specific moment where someone who was loud and wrong has to sit down and say it in front of the person they were loud and wrong about. Josh Hart and Jalen Brunson brought Smith onto the live Roommates podcast, and to his credit, he didn't dodge. He sat there and admitted he'd been wrong. No hedging, no spin. That's rare. Think about how rare that is. How many TV personalities, given every opportunity to deflect, to pivot, to reframe, how many of them actually sit down across from the subject of their doubt and say plainly that they were wrong? Smith did it twice in the same week. Like Hammon, Smith had been skeptical of Brunson and the Knicks on multiple occasions, but the Knicks proved him wrong, and he conceded on national television. Not just that, he apologized to Brunson again, and even got booed as he admitted he was wrong on the special episode. He got booed after apologizing. That's a very specific New York experience. The crowd that had chanted for him on First Take when he was ripping other teams was now booing him in the same building where Brunson had won the title. The receipt doesn't come with a thank you card. It comes with interest. Less than a week before the apology, Smith had criticized Brunson for playing to be an MVP rather than playing to win Game 3. And 4 years after being labeled an overpay, Brunson stood as a champion, a Finals MVP, and the player who forced one of his loudest skeptics to admit he was wrong. Hart brought up criticisms that dated all the way back to their collegiate days at Villanova, and Smith cracked on the duo's own podcast, staring down the exact players he'd spent years counting out. There's something almost Shakespearean about the geography of that moment. Not ESPN's set, not a neutral court. The Roommates show, Brunson and Hart's podcast. Smith walked into their house on their terms with their crowd, and he still chose to show up and take the L. You can say a lot of negative things about the man, but you can't say he didn't face it when it mattered. To fully explain his premature doubts, the 58-year-old analyst recounted decades of heartbreak he'd endured as a Knicks fan. Smith was only 4 years old the last time New York won a title prior to this past Saturday. That's a real thing. That's not an excuse, it's context. 53 years of watching your team flame out, watching the drafts go wrong, watching the free agents leave, watching the front office make the kind of decisions that become punchlines, that leaves a mark. When you've seen that many Knicks nick themselves into oblivion, it becomes genuinely difficult to believe that this time is different. Hart accepted Smith's apology for his criticism toward Brunson, as the ESPN host admitted to the point guard that he never dreamed he would be who the hell he's become. Never dreamed. Not I thought he'd plateau. Not I figured he'd be good, but not great. Never dreamed. That's the honest version. Smith wasn't just wrong about the analysis, he was wrong in a way he hadn't imagined was possible. And that's the real story underneath all the receipts and the apologies and the MSG chants. The story of Jalen Brunson is the story of a player who was evaluated against every existing framework for what an NBA champion looks like, and then quietly demolished every single one of those frameworks without ever saying a word about it. If there was ever a moment for Brunson to revisit old criticism, it was after delivering the Knicks their first championship in 53 years. Instead, he responded to years of doubt the same way he always had, by refusing to engage with it. That's the character of the whole run. His teammates were louder. His coach was louder. Even his dad was louder. Rick had been a visible, sometimes controversial figure throughout the playoffs. But Jalen himself, quiet, methodical, completely unbothered by the noise. While it was unlikely Hammon would appear on the podcast to squash the beef, she tried to stir up Knicks fans again by calling Brunson the franchise's best player of all time. And that move, calling him the greatest Knick ever, is genuinely fascinating in retrospect, because by the time she said it, she'd already admitted her opinion was wrong. So was the greatest Knick ever line a peace offering, a continuation of the trolling, an honest acknowledgement that what he'd done was historic. Probably a little of all three. Hammon has never been a simple person to read, and she wasn't about to become one just because a championship had changed the conversation. By leading the Knicks to their first NBA title since 1973, Brunson had solidified himself as one of the league's top players and proved his long list of critics wrong, many of whom had since tried to backtrack their opinions and apologize for not believing in the point guard. Well, nearly all of them. That nearly all of them was carrying everything. At the time that was written, Hammon was the holdout, the one name the MSG crowd was chanting, the one person who had the most specific, the most quoted, the most memorable anti-Brunson take, and who hadn't fully walked it back yet. Then she walked it back. And the cycle completed itself in the span of about 4 days. What's left now is the question of what this moment actually says about the business of sports media. And the answer is complicated because not all of these takes were made in bad faith. Some of them, like Hammon's, were made with genuine analytical rigor. The small guard history in the NBA was what it was. You could look at Allen Iverson's Philadelphia career, at Isaiah Thomas's championships only once, at the general pattern of big men dominating finals outcomes. And the take wasn't irrational. But the problem with the framework was that it didn't account for what Brunson actually was. It didn't account for how his particular skill set, the footwork in the mid-range, the ability to create and draw contact in the paint despite his size, the late-game composure that borders on supernatural, fit the specific modern NBA environment in a way that made the historical comparison slightly off. He wasn't trying to be Allen Iverson. He was doing something new, and the frameworks built to evaluate the old thing weren't equipped to see it. Maybe the paradigm has shifted permanently. For now, what Brunson achieved only underscores how exceptional he was. With Hammon finally addressing the situation, perhaps everyone can now move on. Or maybe not, because Brunson is still going. He's still under contract. He still has things to prove, or rather, more things to prove to himself, since the external doubters have largely been silenced. And the Knicks are still a team that was built around his specific blueprint: homegrown loyalty, team-friendly sacrifices, Villanova brotherhood, a point guard who plays the whole game and not just the highlight reel. The dynasty, if that's what it becomes, is just getting started. And the people who called it wrong in 2022 are going to have to live with that for however long it runs. With the Larry O'Brien trophy in hand, at least one beef has been settled, at least for now. At least for now, that qualifier matters. Because Smith hasn't become a Brunson apologist who will never question him again. Hammon hasn't disappeared from ESPN. The media machine that generates takes and predictions and confident pronouncements keeps spinning, and Brunson will keep getting evaluated within it. The apologies were real. The reset is real. But the next season starts soon, and the bar will be set again. And whoever sets it will be doing so with the knowledge that the last person who confidently said Jalen Brunson had a ceiling ended up standing at a microphone saying I was wrong. That's the lasting image from this whole saga, not the confetti, not the ring, not even the 45 points in Game 5. It's Becky Hammond at a pre-game press conference saying my opinion was wrong. And Stephen A. Smith, booed by a crowd he loves, saying, I have never been happier to be wrong in my life. And Jalen Brunson, quiet, unbothered, already thinking about next year, saying,